We're going to be making the most requested project that I've had from you all, and that's a Boxy Zipper Pouch. And I wanted to get it done now so you've got plenty of time for Christmas, because these little Boxy Zipper Pouches are going to make wonderful gifts for everyone you know. They're really easy to make. We're just going to go through step by step and I'll show you exactly how. If you're new around here, my name's Stacey. Thanks so much for joining us. Let's make our Boxy Zipper Pouch. You can find a copy of these cutting instructions over on my website. I'll put a link down below. I also have a PDF pattern that you might like to purchase, and I'll put a link for that down below too. We're going to start off by making our tabs. Now it's optional, you don't have to do tabs if you don't want to. This piece measures 4.5 inches by 2.5 inches. I'm just going to take it and fold it wrong sides together, press, then open it up, and then fold the edges into the fold, in towards the fold. Again, wrong sides together, and press. And again on this side. And then what we'll do is we'll fold that in half, and that creates our tab. Now what we're going to do is sew along both sides. So I'm going to stitch at stitch length 3. I'm using wonderful confetti thread, and I've got this neat little foot on here that doubles as a zipper foot and also a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance foot. So I'm going to use that. I've popped a pin in to keep all my layers together nicely. I'm just going to sew along both sides with that 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Use whatever guide you need to do to get that. I did use a pin just to keep it all nicely closed together before I sew. And I'll do the same along this side. So now we need 2 panels for our main fabric, and these measure 12 inches by 7 inches. And all I did was cut a larger piece that measured 16 inches by 14 inches, and I quilted them. Now I didn't do the 3 layers, I just did the main fabric and my batting. And for my batting, I actually used by Annie's Soft and Stable, which gives us really nice shape. You could just use regular batting, or you could use fusible fleece, just whatever you prefer. I would like to use the Soft and Stable just because it gives you a really good structure for this project. So get your fabric, whatever batting you want, quilt that, and then we need to cut it to 2 pieces that measure 12 inches by 7 inches. Now we need to get our zipper, and I'm using this Stitch Supply Co. zipper tape, and it's quite long. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut it so that it is just a bit longer than my panel here. So I want to make sure that that stopper is out of the way. I'll be cutting that off, and then we want to cut it off about here, so about 1/2 inch past the edge. We do want to make sure we have an actual zipper pull. We don't want to cut it off without our zipper pull. And then once I'm happy, I'll just trim that. Or of course you could just buy a zipper that is the right size. So you'd be needing one around probably about 14 inches, 14, 15 inches. Okay, so now because we have cut that, what I do like to do is just sew a couple of stitches to keep that shut so that we can make sure that it's sitting really nicely. So I will just really carefully sew along there. So I've lowered my stitch length down to 2, and I'm just going to take my time and sew right over the zipper, making sure that they're really nicely pushed together. Just like that. And all that's done is just going to help keep it closed for when we're sewing it all together. Then we need to take our quilted panel and make sure that it's right sides facing up, and then we're going to take our zipper and lay it on there right sides down. Something that can help with this step is by Annie's double-sided basting tape. It's become my best friend when it comes to making these zipper pouches. So I'll just take a piece of that and just pop it along the edge of my zipper. Take off the backing. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to line the edge of our zipper along the edge of our panel with the right side of the zipper facing down. And because it's taped, we can kind of just lift it up and check it. Okay, maybe we could fix it a little bit here. This can be a little bit fiddly. Now, if you don't have the tape, then just place it there when you're happy with how you've placed it. Then we're going to take our lining fabric and place that right sides down, and then again line it up along that edge. Now, you could use that tape again, but I find that it doesn't really matter at this point. It's more helpful with the zipper. And now we're just going to clip it in place. Now, if you didn't use binding tape, then you'd just be clipping it in place now. All the 3 layers, that is. So we want to make sure these edges are lined up nicely. All 4 edges are lined up nicely, and then we will clip that lining in place. Now, the lining is the same size as our quilted panel at 12 inches by 7 inches. I find clips are easier to use than pins, but just use whatever you like, and you can double check on this side that everything looks lined up nicely because we've got those 3 layers. And then once you're happy, we're going to sew. So with my zipper foot on, I'm going to stitch quite close to the zipper. I can feel it right here. Now your zipper foot might have a left and a right hand side. Just make sure you've got it positioned in the correct position. And again, I'm stitching at stitch length 2. And I'll remove the clips as they get in my way. Now I can feel the zipper pull under there is going to get in the way, so what I'm going to do is stop, make sure my needle's down, lift my foot up and just grab that zipper pull and pull it right back. And then I'll put everything back in place, put my foot back down and then carry on. Now we're going to press. So now we just want to push down, finger press down on our quilted panel and just give it a press so it's sitting really nicely. And we'll do the same on this side. We don't want any creases in there. And then when it's sitting nicely, we'll press. Okay, and now what we're going to do is a top stitch about 1/8 of an inch along this top seam here. So starting on the very edge, I've changed my stitch length to 3 and now I'm just going to stitch along that edge. And I'm using my zipper foot, which also does a really great 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. But just use whatever guide you need to use to get nice and close to the edge there. Coming right off the edge and cutting our thread. Let's carry on. So if you're using tape, we're just going to do the same on this side. Then we're going to take our second panel. Now, if you are using directional fabric, make sure you're placing it the right way up. And then all we're going to do is place our panel fabric right sides down on top of that, the edge of that zipper again. Also making sure that these edges here are lined up nicely. So okay, that's a bit wonky, so I'm just going to fix it up. Okay, that looks good to me. Then we're just going to flip it over and take our second piece of lining and place that right sides down. And again, line it up along these edges here and along that top edge. And then we're going to clip once we're happy all the edges are lined up nicely. And then we can just check at the top and then flip it over again and just check we're happy with everything. And then when we are, we're just going to sew along that edge just like we did the first time. I'm just going to lower my stitch back down to 2 and sew along again. I could feel my zipper pull in the way, so I pulled it down, but now I've come a little bit away from the edge. I'm just going to make sure my needle's down, lift that foot up and just move that zipper pull out of the way again. And then I'm just going to press again and then sew along the edge with a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance like it was on this side. So I'm going to change my stitch length back up to 3 and then sew along this side with my top stitch. Now I'm going to cut the zipper excess off, and where I'd done my little stay stitches to keep my zipper closed, I was going to cut that off, so I just quickly did it again here so that it will keep those pieces together nicely when we're making our zipper pouch. So I'm just going to take my scissors and cut straight across there, and then do the same on this side. Doesn't matter that we've cut off our little stopper, we don't need him. Now what we're going to do is take our little zipper tab, and I'm going to fold that in half, finger press it in the center there, and then just cut it on that center. Probably didn't need to finger press it. And then what we're going to do is just simply fold them in half. If you've got a pattern, you could see that you're getting the pattern how you want it. I'd quite like a little star showing in mine, so I think that looks cute. And then I'm going to place it so the raw edges are along the raw edges right on top of our zipper there. And then I'm just going to clip that in place. And I'll do the same on this side. So I'm not going to get a little star on this one. That's okay. I fold it in half, line up these edges with these edges and clip, making sure it's in the center of our zipper. And now I'm just going to stay stitch on both sides about 1/8 of an inch just to keep them in place when we're constructing our zipper pouch. Now what we're going to do is take our quilted panels and face them right sides together, and we're going to line up these edges on the top and the sides, and I will just pop a few clips in. And all we're going to do is sew along this edge with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and then we're going to do the same on this side. We're going to line up the lining edges. And again, I'll pop some clips in. But on the lining side, we need to keep an opening. So if you want to, you could just do a little mark. It needs to be about 5 inches just so we can pull the whole box pouch back through itself. So about 5 inches. So we're going to start here, sew along and stop here, then start here and then carry on. So now I'm sewing with a 1/4 inch seam allowance and my stitch length is 2. I'm just going to sew along the whole edge of our quilted panels. And when I come up to my mark that tells me to stop, I am just going to do a back stitch, because when we turn it right sides out, it does tend to pull those stitches. And then I'm going to carry on at my second mark, back stitch again. Now what we're going to do is open it up flat. Now this bit is a little bit fiddly. We want to line up the center seam basically right on top of our zipper. So once it's where it needs to be, let's give these seams a press open. And again, this is a little bit fiddly. I just think it helps it sit a little bit nicer when we're done. And then I'm going to flip it over and do the same on this side. So we're just getting that lining fabric to sit really nicely. So we've got the folded edges for the quilted panel and the lining folded here on both sides. And then that center seam, we want it to sit basically right on top of our zipper. And then I will press those seams open. Okay, so it can be a little bit fiddly, so just do your best. All right, I finally got it. There we go. So now we've got our lining folded and our quilted panel folded. What we're going to do is sew along each of these ends. So I will pop a few clips in. We want to make sure all those edges are lined up nicely, and we want to make sure that where the zipper is and that center seam is pretty much centered. And that lining fabric too. So just take a minute to get everything lined up nicely, and then pop some clips in. And then we'll do the other side as well, making sure that center seam is lined up with the zipper and the lining is lined up with the zipper. And when I'm happy, I'll pop my clip in. Okay, we can check on this side. Can you see how I've got everything lined up nicely there? Now what we're going to do is just sew along both edges. We're not going to worry about a back stitch. We're still stitching at stitch length 2 and with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now it's at this point it can be a bit bulky, so just go slow, especially if you decided to use the by Any Soft and Stable. If you use just regular batting, it won't be quite as bulky. Okay, coming off the edge there and doing the same on the other side. Okay, let's do our boxy corners. So now on all 4 corners, we need to measure 1 1/4 inches. So I'm just going to take my ruler, find my 1 1/4 inches and place those markings on the edge of my pouch here. So that's 1 1/4 on this side, right on the edge. That's 1 1/4 this side, right on the fold. And then I'm just going to mark that. And then I'm going to repeat that for all 4 corners. And I'm just using a washable marker. We're not going to see this, so whatever you've got on hand is fine. Okay, and now what we're going to do is cut those corners out. So we're going to cut through all the layers and cut our corners out on all 4 sides. So now what we're going to do on all 4 corners is where we've cut it, we want to open that up and then create a nice straight line just like that. And then when we're happy, I'm just going to pop a clip in just there in the center to hold that in place. And then we want to do the same for the lining. So you might need to maneuver the layers a bit to make it easier for yourself. And I'm just going to open the lining up and do exactly the same. It is a little bit fiddly, so just take your time. Okay, that looks great. So I'm just going to move the pin, or the clip rather, so it's holding both the layers, the quilted panel and the lining. Can you see how I've done that? Now, if you want to, you could even clip these sides down just to make sure they're not getting all twisted in there, and so you don't end up in a right royal pickle. And then all we're going to do is sew along this edge, closing off our quilted panel and our lining in one go. So starting on the very edge, stitching at stitch length 2 with my 1/4 inch seam allowance, I will do a back stitch. And then when I come up to this end, I will also do a back stitch. And now I'll repeat that for all 4 corners. So now we've got what looks like a bit of a mess, but I've sewn all 4 corners down and we need to turn it right sides out. So I did forget to say to make sure that zip is left a little bit open. But what I'm going to do now is yank it right open and then turn it right sides out. And this never looks great. And then I'm going to push all the lining in. And what we can do is grab a point turner, and then with my point turner, just get all those points, all those corners looking really good. Okay, so that is looking super cute. So now what we need to do is just sew that lining close. So I'm just going to pull it back out and then line up those edges. We did press them, so they're going to sit really nicely and line up really nicely. So I'm just going to sew really close to the edge, closing up that opening. So I did just pop a pin in to keep all the edges lined up nicely. Just going to sew right on that edge there. I will do a back stitch. And our opening was quite big, so let's make sure we close it up properly. I'll do a back stitch, and then we can trim any loose threads, and then let's take a look at our little pouch. So there's our little zipper pouch. Isn't that just absolutely adorable? This end there, I think that's looking fantastic. Now what you can do is you can actually fold along these edges here and just give them a light press if you'd like to get it to really sit in a really boxy shape. I actually like to do that with mine, and you might also just want to give these a little press, roll them out so everything's just sitting really nicely. But there we have our little boxy zipper pouch. What do you think? Isn't that just absolutely adorable? I hope you liked this tutorial. Now I think they'd make a fantastic Christmas gift for absolutely everyone, especially if you use fabric that you know the recipient would love. And if you're wondering about the cute fabric I used, it's called Egg and Friends by Kimberly Kite for Ruby Star Society. Thank you so much for watching till the very end, and I'll see you in the next video.